For a great cup of joe, there's one thing you should know. Your morning brew can also be playful. Buff Boy Brewing guys make the temperature rise, and you surely feel naughty when you swallow our coffee. If you want some real heat, give your mouth a fine treat. You will want some more, rest assured. Buff Boy Brewing, you can't get enough of.
It's time for The Scribble, your weekly fix of celebrity chats, bizarre stories in the news, and basic random chatter with best-selling author and syndicated radio host Jeremy Bradley. Make sure your seat is in the upright and locked position and your barf bag is securely in place. Here's Jeremy Bradley.
Thank you very much, Larson. Jeremy Bradley here. This is The Scribble, and it's also, this might be a record. We're starting a series, basically. This is our third episode talking about inmates, prison lockup, life. And so it started with, the first episode 2 weeks ago now, was me sharing with you that I was corresponding back and forth with an inmate. And we were working on a project for our syndicated radio shows where we were going to do a podcast series about inmates who are making a difference, who have turned their lives around since they've been locked up. And that could be whether they are making a difference in their community somehow or within the lockup community. Maybe they're inspiring others. Maybe they're teaching. Maybe they formed a group. Maybe they've, just done something for the betterment of themselves and the people around them. And the project fell through, so we didn't actually do it. But we had been matched up with 5 different inmates from across the United States. And kind of, we had the introductions as to, this is who I am, this is what we're doing, share your story, I'd like to get to know you. And when the project fell through, I continued messaging with them back and forth. And that carried on it's carried on to this day. And so I found out earlier this year that one of the inmates had died. He'd killed himself. He committed suicide in his cell, according to local reports. So when I had gone to reply to a message from him, it had been a couple months, it said, the message wouldn't go through, user not found. I Googled his name, come to find out he's killed himself and he's dead. And so there was a bit of a shock because here's somebody that I've never met, never even had a phone call with, but you spend all this time messaging back and forth and you feel like you get to know them. They know you. I opened up a lot of, about my relationship, about my business. When we were launching our coffee app, we were having discussions about business and I'm sitting there going, wow, this isn't, I'm married too, so this was not like a flirty, sexty kind of a thing. Also too, because I realized that none of this communication is private, and that's the last thing that I want is people reading this. Our account was set up through our business as well, so not only am I going to have my staff seeing this, I'm going to have the authorities at the prison reading this too. No thanks, don't need that. But certainly to, read that, oh my God, he's dead. Like, you kind of feel like this person, even though you've never met, you've never had you've never spoken, through words, you never had a voice conversation with them. It's just still kind of hit me. And then the other side of that was I've never been affected by suicide like that. I don't know anybody who, all of a sudden is just gone tomorrow because they decided to take their life, however they did it. I've never been touched by that before. So this was a new experience for me. So it wasn't somebody who was like directly in my life in this city, in my hometown or whatever. This is somebody from, across the way that I don't know, but still I kind of felt this weird connection. That prompted a debate or discussion about what kind of a relationship could you have with somebody who's locked up, that is never getting out, who you're never, physically going to get to touch or whatever. We see all these stories about people getting married behind bars, and that is bizarre to me because it's just not a typical relationship that would fulfill me. But if that works for somebody else who wants to have that emotional connection with somebody, and that's all they need is just an ear to listen or, whatever it might be, well, that's great then. But for me, I'm too demanding, I'm too impatient. That would never work for me. But anyway, so that's what we were talking about last week on the show. Now, we ran out of time because you know that I like to take my time when I share stories, and I ramble. Let's be honest about that. And so I didn't get to the story that I was going to say that I do know an inmate. Okay, so I had never been affected by the suicide side of things, but do I know somebody who's been locked up? Yes, I do. And it's an unlikely person in your world that you can have, right? The different relationships that you can have with people. You can have, your siblings, your relatives, your friends, your coworkers, your whatever it is. This was not one that I was expecting. And I'm going to tell you who I know and why he was locked up on the Scribble, and it starts right after this.
Isn't it crazy that you wait for payday, but before you know it, you're strapped for cash again? It's time to stop blowing your money and become a smart spender with the book, The Official Guide to Being an American Cheapskate at cheapskatebook.com. Learn simple ways to cut costs at home every day and during special times of the year. Don't go broke at Christmas. Don't remortgage the house for a fancy vacation. The book is filled with tips to save you money throughout the year. Check out the best-selling book, The Official Guide to Being an American Cheapskate at cheapskatebook.com or on Amazon and iTunes.
Ever had something to get off your chest but never had the balls to say it? That's a load of crap. Speak Free with JB.com is exactly what you've been waiting for. Your chance to tell it like it is and not care what anybody else thinks. Have your say on issues of the day. Join newspaper and radio columnist Jeremy Bradley as he tells it like it is. Hundreds of thousands of people have stopped by, including some well-known celebrities who have had a chat with JB and speak candidly about what's really going on in the world. You can join them too. Have a rant or a rave. Be brave and head on over to www.speakfreewithjb.com now.
JB here on the Scribble, continuing on with our series, was what it's turned into be, about inmates, lockup, life. And it wasn't until I started to watch those A&E shows, life, sorry, what is it called? Tell me again, give me the name, Bonnie or Tim, who's 60 Days In, thank you. And where you kind of see that inside of, what prison life and it's a world is what it is. It's a world, what that world is like. And so I said earlier in the show, when we were starting to go into talks about production of a podcast that these inmates could listen to, I was like, inmates can listen to podcasts? That's very strange. But my team had reason. They're like, yeah, actually there's this whole platform. And so I thought the whole idea of prison or jail, whatever you call it, I realize there's a difference, but we don't have time for that. But I thought the whole point of it is to remove you from all those kinds of things. No outside contact. You don't get the internet. You don't get podcasts. Can't. So I was always amazed when these guys that we were messaging with, when they said like they get the tablet that they can email me on, that they can, you can do video calls, you can have audio calls, you can, that was totally foreign to me because, again, as an outsider who at the time, a few years ago, let's say when I was even in my 30s, you could ask me, do you know anybody who's been locked up? No, I don't know anybody who's gone to jail. I really don't. I don't run with that crowd. Well, I mean, I guess, I've heard about people, right? Like you're kind of, I went to school with that guy, 15 years ago, whatever. But I'm saying somebody close to me. No, I never had that situation. So let's go back though to when I was in school. Oh, so let me just clarify what I just said. So, yes, when I was going through school in my 20s, I did not know somebody. But in my 30s, that changed because somebody from my 20s was arrested. Does that make sense? No? Well, then forget what I just said because I'm going to start all over. All right. So when I was majoring in journalism in school, I was 21, 22 years old. My journalism instructor, his name was Steve Vogelsang, and he was the renowned sportscaster in my hometown of Winnipeg, Manitoba. So he was on the number one station. He was the sport. He couldn't go to a restaurant without being recognized, or selfies weren't a thing back then. So it's not like he was doing selfies, but certainly he was back when you had kind of like a local celebrity and people gave a shit. Steve, you would know Steve. So when he left the station and he was going into teaching and he was coming to the school that I was attending for journalism, I was like, oh my God, my instructor is Steve Vogelsang. This is crazy. Like he's like a local legend. I mean, and he's going to be teaching me. That's really cool. So for the 2 years that I was there at the school, he was my journalism instructor for one of the years anyway. And I was applying for newspaper jobs. For our younger listeners, Google what a newspaper is. And I thought this is really cool because he knows who I am. We're kind of colleagues now in a sense that we're both, he was in media. I'm looking for media work, whatever it is. He didn't do newspapers, but, news is news. And so I was applying for jobs at newspapers across Canada, and I was, developing a portfolio of things. And so he was, and then again, the instructors that we had, that's what made this program different, was they did care about you. If you wanted to, if he was your reference, that his name had clout. Like his name, okay, maybe not necessarily in Winnipeg, but if, he was part of the bigger network of stations or whatever it is, oh, he is the sports guy on this station in Winnipeg. Okay. So, he was known across the country because, again, he would be, you have to think about it. He's a sportscaster, so he's going around the country to the different national, right, to the NHL, to whatever it is. So he's going to be known in the news world. So if he's your reference, that's saying something for you. And so I had 2 job interviews in Alberta, so 2 provinces over from where I was growing up, and I remember, they were always, our instructors were always encouraging us to apply for jobs even when you're in school, because there's no better education on the job and getting paid for it than working for a media outlet. And so I had, it was just coincidental that 2 newspapers in Alberta, kind of close to each other, kind of not, were interested in hiring me as a junior journalist, as a reporter. So I'd come into school, or come into class, and said to Steve, who was my journalism instructor, Steve, what would you suggest? Is one ad or opportunity better than the other? Read the job ads, you tell me. I mean, his advice was kind of, why not just go and check out both of them? I mean, it's how lucky is that these places are maybe 2 hours apart from each other, right? I mean, opportunity knocks. So it's not like, excuse me. It's not like, can I get some water, Bon? It's not like you're, flying to Alberta. Excuse me, everybody. I that rarely happens to me, but I've got to get some water here. It's not like you're flying to Alberta, coming back, going 2 days later. You're already going to be there for a job interview. Why not go to the other place and check it out as well, right? 2 birds with 1 stone. So I said, all right, okay, fine, that's fine. I had the money. It's not like it was, I wasn't flying first class or whatever. I ended up, this is sort of it's not that I'm getting off track, but I was going to say, one of my friends, she lived in Saskatchewan, which is the province in between Manitoba and Alberta for our non-Canadian listeners. She was driving home to Saskatchewan one weekend, and so I went with her to drive there, and then I ended up taking a Greyhound bus from there to Alberta, to the first town in Alberta. And then I ended up flying home. But to cut costs as a student, that's what I did, was I not hitchhiked, but I guess in a way. I got a ride halfway, and then I took a bus the other half of the way. And this is before like cell phone technology. We did not have social media. We didn't even have texting really back then, by the way. But anyway, so Steve had said to me, just go, and you got these 2 opportunities. Go for both interviews. See what happens. You're going to be there. So I said, okay, great. He's like, here's my number. Give me a call, while you're there, or whatever it is. And it was that moment where I was just like, this is a real guy now. This is not this celebrity on TV, and but it was like, wow, he's I'm just this young kid who's aspiring to do this, and so it seemed like a big deal that I would get this guy's phone number. So I go and I do the 2 interviews. I get one of them did offer me the job, and I think what I needed at that time in my life, though, was just to get that validation that I had what it took. I wasn't ready, in hindsight. In the moment, I did not know that, but I was not ready to move to another province away from my family while I was still in school. But it was good to know that somebody would be interested in me, that I had what it took, that, somebody wanted to hire me. At the end of the day, the pay just wasn't good enough. It would have been very isolating, especially being a young gay guy as well. like I said, we're going back 20 years. Alberta was not and is not in some places the most progressive or, open-minded place. So there was all that kind of stuff. What am I doing to myself, right? When I'm in my 20s, I'm just now kind of experiencing the gay culture. I was going to, gay bars and having, friends that were like me. So now you're going to cut yourself off from that. And like I said, this is before social media and all that other stuff. So it's not like you were, able to connect quickly and more efficiently with other people. So, that, the pay not being great, I'm going to be isolated. It was just, it just wasn't worth it. And I also realized too that when you're a student journalist, right? When you're just this new, they're going to pay you as little as they can because they can. Now, when I look at it and go, oh, would I work there for $25,000 a year? Fuck no. God, no. No. Nope. Not happening. Never. Even 30,000, even 40,000, I wouldn't do it. So Steve gave me his phone number, and I called him while I was there. I let him know how the first interview went. He was a typical journalist asking me questions. Did you like this? What did you think of this? Well, could you see yourself? What about if this happened? And so it was just a really good, I was going to say a really good talk me through, but that's not really, that's how good of a journalism instructor he was, folks. I'm making up phrases now. And then I had the second interview, and then I came home. And so it was just kind of great because I was able to learn what to do and what not to do in these interviews. And then I didn't take either of the jobs. I was offered the one, like I said, the money was shit, and just ugh. So fast forward, I'm done school. I'm out in the real world. I'm hosting my syndicated radio shows. I've got a best-selling book. I'm doing all these things, and all of a sudden I find out Steve Vogelsang was arrested. Steve Vogelsang. Look him up, by the way. I've said his name enough times on here. Vogelsang. Steve Vogelsang, Winnipeg. He was arrested, and I'm sitting there going, what the what? Really? This cannot be this. I mean, Vogelsang is not a very common last name, right? And he's from Winnipeg, and his name is Steve. I'm like, what? So I go and I look. He was busted for robbing banks. He was a bank robber. Ladies and gentlemen, my journalism instructor, Mr. Sports Guy in Winnipeg, is arrested for robbing banks. Not just one. I'm saying banks, plural. Did you hear that? Banks. Plural. This guy that I looked up to, he is the news guy. Arrested for robbing banks. Now there's a backstory though. He left the college. So like I said, there was a 10-year window from the time that I left to the time I heard about this and that it happened. So I didn't know that he had left the college. I wasn't keeping tabs on my former instructors. He was going through a divorce. He had some kind of a relationship with a student at the college. That wasn't, it's not like, but it just, he was not working there anymore. He moved across the country. He split from his wife. He was living out of his truck for a long time. He was, going through emotional troubles, mentally unstable. He was broke. He was homeless, essentially. And he really hit hard times. And so, to make ends meet or whatever it was, he was doing this. He was robbing banks, and he wasn't getting a shit ton of money. And he wasn't even disguising himself. Like, when people go in and rob a bank, they've got a mask or they've done this. He was basically just walking in. He might have had like a hood up or something, but his face was fully exposed. And so this is where you could paint everybody with the same brush and go, he robbed a bank. That's criminal. He's a danger to society. No regard for this. It's not like he was, guns or whatever. He wasn't, waving guns in people's faces. It wasn't that. He just would come in and just have a note, slide it and say, give me all your money or whatever it said, and would just casually make his way out. And then he would have his, he would like ditch his jacket or something. And then he would, but yeah, he wasn't brandishing weapons. There was no, putting a knife to somebody's throat. He wasn't doing that. And so people who knew him, because obviously he had many students throughout the years at the college, people who knew him, students, colleagues, even former, broadcasters, people in the media, because he was a well-known guy. Everybody is sitting here going, that can't be him. It just can't be him. I didn't know him for all that long. Like I just said, I mean, I knew him for, that brief time that I was in school there. I knew of him, obviously, for a long time, but knowing my name, me knowing, I'm sitting going, it can't be. That's not, something is wrong. Something is wrong. Last week when we had that discussion about, you get one phone call and you call your best friend, what would they, and you say, I just got arrested. What would they assume that you did? And I couldn't think of anything, right? That would be like somebody going and saying, Jeremy was arrested for robbing a bank. People would be like, something must have been wrong. Like, that's not him. What, really? Like, what? So that's where you take that step back. And like I said, I didn't know anybody who had been arrested before, but my attitude, a criminal is a criminal is a criminal is a criminal. You broke the law, you did that, you deserve to be locked up, and, poop, spit on you, is how I would look at it. So it wasn't until that moment when I'm sitting here going, and so then I reconnected with a couple of the people, some former classmates. And so, thanks to Facebook or whatever it is. And again, this is going back a few years now. It's not like this just happened. This was, I'd have to look and see when it was. I didn't know about it until a while after, because a lot of my time was spent in Los Angeles. I was removed from Winnipeg for so I wasn't really following what was going on back home. And so I'm connecting with my former classmates, and all of us just said, something is like, we're not denying that he did. We're not saying he would never do it. We're saying something was wrong with him to do this. That's what we're saying. I did not have a conversation with anybody who was like, no, that's not, because again, his face was literally shown. It's very tough to deny it when he did not cover his face. He did not do anything to obscure, to obstruct his, seeing who it is. He didn't do that. So that's what makes it even weirder. Even somebody who doesn't know him is going to look at that and go, he didn't cover his face? Really? And he's going to do this multiple times? Like he's robbed how many banks in how many provinces? And he's not covering his face. He's not doing that. So and again, when you think this is a journalist, he knows what questions police are going to ask, right? I mean, come on now. So that was just, I had, I was going to say a rude awakening. It didn't happen to me, but you just look at that and go, I have some compassion here, because that's not the guy I know. He must have been really fucked up. Like, there must be really something wrong. And then you hear about lost the marriage, or not lost the marriage, the marriage ended, lost the house, lost his money, living out of a car, embarrassed because of a relationship that he had with a student. So he can't show his face back there now. Like, that's somebody who's at the end of his rope. I mean, this is somebody who's at the breaking point. And so that was a last resort for him. I'm not excusing it. I'm not saying he had no other options but to rob a bank. Obviously there's, resources available to everybody. But I still, to this day, I believe he's released now. I haven't looked recently. He did his time, as far as I know. I think it was 3 or 4 years, I think is what he got. But he is somebody who, and maybe I'll do this after the show, I would reach out to. He did an interview when he was locked up. And by the way, we did look into this. So I was talking about how the American prison system, you can buy, you can email, you can, buy credits to message people. Canada doesn't, as far as I know, have that in places. So I did a couple years ago look him up, because I knew that he was in Alberta locked up, and I wanted to see, is there a way to message? Can I get a phone call? Just when he did this interview, he said that he's basically lost everybody. His friends, everybody's disowned him. His family's disowned him, his friends. And I just go, wow. And not like I said, it's not that we were besties. It's not that, maybe even if I were to call him and say, hey, it's Jeremy Bradley. Do you remember me from Red River College? Right? I mean, does he remember me? Maybe if he, sees a picture of me or something, but, by name, I don't know that he would remember who I am. But I just, I don't know if this is on a human level. Is this just like, he's a person still? Like, come on. I don't know. But, maybe it's a different story if he were to have murdered somebody, or if it, some kind of a big violent thing. And I guess you could consider an armed or a bank robbery, you could consider that to be a violent crime. I guess you could. But like I said, there was no weapons, there was no, blood, there was nobody slashed, there was nobody hospitalized, there was nothing. That was a very emotionally traumatic moment for those people, absolutely. So, okay, that doesn't make it, right. But that's somebody where when you know them, right? I guess it's a different situation. If when you're watching Dateline and you're seeing, oh, well, this guy murdered this and whatever, and you're like, yo, lock it, throw away the key. Fuck it. What a piece of shit. Get rid of him. He deserves a parasite. Let him rot in jail. And then you sit there and go, somebody that I know has done this. I mean, this is, you have that emotional connection to them. Does it change your opinion? So that, to you, dear listener, is my question. I mean, would it change your mind? Somebody that, I'm not saying that I was close with him. Again, I'm not saying that we were friends. But just like somebody that you just know that that's not him. Do you turn your back on them? I mean, there's nothing that you can do to help them when they're locked up, right? So it's a different, you're limited as to what you can do, especially in my home country of Canada, where I can't have contact with him. What can I do? But do you disown them? Do you, does it depend on the crime? All these things that I've just kind of posed over the last 10 minutes, what would you do? Send me an email. Tell me your thoughts. Live, L-I-V-E, at jbonair.com. Live at jbonair.com. I'm going to look him up now, Steve Ogilsang, and just, I'll reach out. Maybe we'll go for a 4th episode next week. Could you imagine I'm going to have Steve on the show? Wouldn't that be incredible? No, I wouldn't do that. I would have no problem getting back to, going for coffee or something with him and just having a chat. And it's not even to interview him or to, just pick his brain, but just be like, you know what? I know that you said in that story in the newspaper years ago that you don't have anybody and everybody's disowned you. I'm not saying that like, hey, let's be friends now, but I was thinking about you. I was here going, is he okay? I was looking you up and seeing, where you were, if I could reach out to you. Would that make a difference? I don't know. I want to hear from a teacher, by the way. Let me actually ask you what. My mom was a teacher. My brother's a teacher. His wife is a teacher. But, would it be embarrassing? Would you think that would be embarrassing to have one of your students? My relatives are students in like grade school, not university or college. But maybe that would be embarrassing, though, to have one of your students come and reach out to you. Or what would you think? So teachers as well, I want to hear from you. Live at jbonair.com. Sorry, I'm waving around a pen and it's clicking in my hand if you're hearing that noise. Live at jbonair.com. Live at jbonair.com. Back on the Scribble right after this.
It's never too early to start thinking about your next holiday. Have you checked out Mexico recently? From tequila tasting, swimming with horses, to ziplining through the jungle and watching whales and dolphins in their natural habitat, Puerto Vallarta has it all. Visit mexico.jbonair.com to see all the fun PV has to offer. That's at mexico.jbonair.com for hundreds of photos, interviews, and videos from around the tourist hotspot. Check out mexico.jbonair.com for all the fun. That's mexico.jbonair.com.
Who are the Kardashians feuding with now? What did that little thug Justin Bieber do this time? Who's getting hitched? And who's headed for Splitsville? Hear the latest celebrity news and gossip every day on Entertainment Wrap-Up. The good, the bad, the ugly, but mostly the ridiculously hilarious. It's all recapped in this daily segment at entertainmentwrapup.com. Have a laugh at the expense of the rich and famous when they take themselves way too seriously. It's 3 minutes of time-wasting fun at entertainmentwrapup.com. Check out Entertainment Wrap-Up at entertainmentwrapup.com. Brought to you by Speak Free Books.
We hear you chirping. Get scribbling. Tweet up the Scribble at The Scribble Show. Join the discussion with Jeremy Bradley. It's all going down right now on Twitter at The Scribble Show and at thescribbleshow.com.
JB here, back on the Scribble. So in our final remaining moments, they were just laughing at me. My team, I said we've been together, 20 years. And I jokingly said in the last segment about, watch, Steve Vogelsang is going to be on the show with me next week. And they just said to me, you're going to try to make that happen, is what Bonnie Winters, our producer, just said. I don't know. See, there's a weird kind of, like, I interview people about, their movie, their TV show, their book, whatever it is, to have somebody that I know right? And to have such a personal discussion about something like that, that's, I can have, I can ask you, I've interviewed people, for shit tons of things before, but this is, I don't know, that'd be like me sitting down with my brother and asking him all these just, personal questions and broadcasting it. I've never had that crossover. I've never, so I've got how many days to think about it? 6 days. I just have this feeling somehow they're going to get this clip or this show over to him and they'll be like, talk with Jeremy. And now we're all of a sudden be sitting up in a coffee shop talking next week. No, you know what though? I was honest. I said that I'll look him up. I will shoot him a note after this. I will absolutely reach out and just say, hope you're doing well. And if you want to talk, but I still feel like I said to teachers in the last segment, I think that it might be embarrassing to have, because a teacher is supposed to be the role model, right? The mentor, and not the, I don't know. Anyway, so again, the email address, live@jbonair.com. Steve Ogilsang, if you're listening, come on, let's talk. Live@jbonair.com. My name is Jeremy Bradley. I will talk to you next week. Bye, everybody.
Want more Scribble? Check out thescribbleshow.com for past shows, celebrity interviews, cheapskate tips, and more. That's at thescribbleshow.com and on Twitter at The Scribble Show. The Scribble is a speak-free media presentation.
If you want some